Hello, everyone. Gregg Bendian here. Welcome to the ProgCast, where we talk about all different types of music and get into some very geeky details. And today will be no exception because I am joined by a very well-known producer. He's a recording engineer, mix engineer, and he's been so on many classic recordings, not the least of which is the first two XTC records, White Music and Go To. But he's also produced the Dukes of Stratosphear, who are somehow related to XTC. Maybe we can figure out that. And also he's produced Radiohead and Bebop Deluxe and so many other people. Shiv Kumar Sharma, which is something I want to ask him about. So I'm very pleased to welcome to the program today, Mr. John Leckie.
Hi. Thanks for inviting me.
So glad you could be here. So glad that Mr. Partridge could connect us and we can have some fun talking about him and talking about
him behind his ears will be burning, won't they?
Yes, a little bit. But yeah, John, I'm so pleased that you could take the time today. And, you know, I'm so very curious about your tape op sort of apprenticeship, if it could be called that, at Abbey Road and other studios, and some of your early experiences where you're seeing the music being made. How did you get into that situation to begin with?
Well, how did I get into it to begin with? I went to college. I went to school. I went to college. I got some A levels. Never went to university. Couldn't get the mathematics. You know, I could get the physics and geography were the A levels, the advanced levels I got. But anyway, I somehow I wanted to work in film or television. And I saw a course, television and film course, which I went to, did 2 years there, and worked in that. They offered me a job at the BBC, and then I didn't want to do that. I turned that down. Television companies. This is 1968, 69, I suppose. I was like 18, and I got a job in a little film company, just dubbing theatre in Soho. And I kept thinking, what else can I do? You know, what else can I do? I know I'll write to all the recording studios in London. Now, I'm not a musician. You know, I've been going to gigs since I was 13. I mean, I saw the Stones in 1963 and the Yardbirds at the Marquee. I was there always, all through those mid-period 60s. John Mayall's Blues Breakers just followed them everywhere.
Hey, let's pause there for a second. Gigs that you saw like that? I'd love to hear that.
Okay. Let's see. Going back. I live in North London, near a place called Kilburn or Ladbroke Grove. You probably know Portobello Road, Notting Hill Gate. North of there, I lived, and even north of that is a place called Kilburn, and up there, it's still there, is Kilburn State, which is a 1930s built cinema, not a theatre, it's a cinema, although there's a huge, probably the biggest in Britain, Wurlitzer organ, which played during the interval, and it rose up from the screen. You know, the curtains would draw across the screen, and the Wurlitzer would come up, and they come and serve ice cream and things. And it was massive. I think it's 6,000 people, you know. But it's still there, Kilburn State. But round the back, round the side, was Kilburn State Ballroom, which was a ballroom for dancing. I didn't have a balcony. It was quite small. And later it became a bingo hall. And in that ballroom on a Friday night, they used to have bands. And I saw the Stones, the Swinging Blue Jeans, Gene Vincent. I'm trying to think of some other, Screaming Lord Sutch. Those kind of bands, and I was like just 13. I just turned 12, you know, and there was no alcohol. And then everyone said, "Oh man, you have to go and see the Yardbirds at the Marquee because they freak out." And I'm like, what do you mean they freak out? Well, they get the audience all jumps around and goes berserk, and I'm going, well, I don't fancy that. Is it like a fight or something? No, it's not like that at all. So we did go on my. It was actually my 15th birthday. We went to. The Yardbirds at the Marquee, and sure enough, when it went to this is with Eric, you know, when it went to the solo, the whole audience, people would jump up and down and throw their arms around, and it was like, he's okay, he's just freaking out, you know. This, of course, continued for a few years in London.
What was the lineup of the Yardbirds at that point besides Clapton?
Keith Relf, Jim McCarthy, Chris Dreyer, and Paul. Who would have been? I don't know. Is Paul Samuel Smith in that? Yes, he would be. Yeah, he hadn't left yet, of course. So yeah, it was a normal band. And the record Five Live Yardbirds live at the Marquee was made just a month before, and they were playing like every Friday night. They would play the Marquee. Anyway, I then, of course, discovered music and all sorts of things that you discover when you're 15, 16 years old in London and staying out late. And we used to go to a place called Cluck's Cleek, which is in West Hampstead. Cluck's Cleek with K's is above the Railway Tavern, above a big pub by West Hampstead Station. And the upstairs room was called Cluck's Cleek. And originally it was a jazz club where they'd have traditional kind of jazz playing. And the guy was putting on Alex's Corner and different people, pretty much the same bill that was happening at the Marquee, although a bit more, what could you say, a bit more, not as dancey, not as, it wasn't the West End because it was Hampstead, so there was a bit more maturity, and even at that time, people would clap after the solo. So whenever Eric or whoever was playing a solo, if you saw Family and there was the guy who played the clarinet or the sax, in Family, and it was a solo. It was tradition to clap after the solo, like formally, it was a kind of jazz thing that came left over from that. So yeah, we saw every Tuesday, Thursday night, we were at Cluck's Cleek. Fleetwood Mac, 10 years after, they played on the cheap night, they played on the Thursday. So it was, I think, 5 and 6, which in old money, 5 shillings and 6pence, would be 27.5 pence. So, that's how much it costs to get in. In today's money, it was 5 and 6, and on a Tuesday it was more expensive. It was 7 and 6.
Okay, now you're just rubbing it in.
Yeah, but and there you could drink, of course. It was a licensed sort of pub. So, and we were all mods, so we were all drinking Bacardi and Coke and whiskey and Coke and things, and in our best Carnaby Street gear and stuff. But no, at that time, and it kind of moved because then we saw. I could make a list. I'm just off the top of my head, but Brian Auger Trinity with Julie Driscoll dressed and with the eyes and stuff, and Graham Bond Organisation. I tell you, is still the best band I've ever seen. Graham Bond Organisation with Jack Bruce, before Cream and everything. Graham Bond at Cluck's Cleek is just fantastic. There is a CD of it live at Cluck's Cleek, but it's really badly recorded. The BBC Graham Bond sessions are really good if you're into that. But he just had this great voice and dangerous.
Was Ginger on drums at that point?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Ginger and Jack Bruce, and Graham Bond playing Hammond, singing, and sax all at the same time, and really sweaty, and he's got this great hair, and they're all just like fantastic. Graham Bond, and then John Mayall with Eric Clapton, and then and we used to go to see John Mayall. You never knew if you were going to get Peter Green or Eric Clapton, whether the new guy was going to be playing or Eric will be back, which I guess is 66, 65, 66, yeah. So I went to loads of gigs, and when I went to college and everything, and kind of discovered Pink Floyd. You were saying about film and the visual element of music. Well, Pink Floyd and Jimi Hendrix was very much, I guess, psychedelic music. It became like an image. It became a moving picture as you listen to the music, kind of thing. And it's almost like the music was constructed to show you visuals, And so I thought, because I was not happy in this film cover, I'll write to all the recording studios. So I wrote to all the studios, and Abbey Road was the only one out of 5 that answered. And I got the interview, and I got the job, and took it, and that was my whole life changed. I never kind of went back. It was totally different, because it was so time consuming, intense. 7 days a week, It's just studio and sleep really for quite a few years, really, for probably about 10 years. But particularly when you first start off and you get all these offers and things, it's not so much the people saying, oh, I'm going to be working with one of the Beatles or the Pink Floyd. It was the idea of doing something with a team of kind of like-minded people, you know, and you got a result at the end of it. You know, you had the finished record, of course, and there was the record, you had the cover, and so it was almost as good as a film, I suppose. I think the thing that I didn't like about a film was there were so many people involved. I mean, this is before television or anything, camcorders or anything like that, but actually, you know, running a film and the union thing and everything about making a film. You know, I had an 8mm camera and I've still got some crazy stuff from that time, but nothing that I would ever show people, kind of thing, you know.
Well, you were living that time. It's quite an incredible period, and you were soaking it all in.
Yeah.
So you got accepted at Abbey Road, and your mind must have been blown on a daily basis.
Not daily, no. Weekly maybe. No, I mean, it's a lot of hard work and you have to do a lot of other things that you're not really into. I mean, it can be really, what's it say, challenging, I suppose is the word, challenging to do all these things, you know. And you learn about, I suppose, operating really, was operating equipment, which is relatively easy, you know, push the button, don't push the button, but you have to know when to push the button. Sure. And you have to know when someone tells you to push the button, to push it, but you also have to question who's the guy that's telling you to push the button. Like I was talking to someone about this, of when you're running the tape and someone says stop, you have to ascertain who's saying stop. Whether the producer's saying stop doesn't mean that you're gonna stop you know, he's the one in charge. You know, it might be the keyboard player that's in charge or the singer or something. So being a tape op is very it's a good position to work out the power structure in the room of when you're making a record. Yeah, so that's kind of how I started really. But I've always, even although I'm not a musician, and I'm still not a musician, you know, a lot of producers, and sometimes I'm really embarrassed about that I can't go to a piano and find harmonies or pick up the guitar and say, oh, play it like this, kind of thing, the way Andy can. But you know, because I guess because I've got that rock and roll music in my soul, you know, I've been there all the time, you know.
Oh, the ear is there. The ear, yeah. You know, the ear clearly is there.
Yeah, and I think the you know, and the other thing, of course, is the language. Is when a producer is talking to people and, you know, giving them confidence and all those kind of things. The energy that you bring to it, and every record and different people that I work with, you know, always different. You know, it's a different gang kind of thing.
Right. It's give a compliment before you give a critique, right? There are some Abbey Road tape op situations that I wanted to ask you about, if you can recall. Now, obviously, I know this is a long time ago, but didn't you do tape op on an Ornette Coleman London Symphony Orchestra date?
Ornette Coleman, yes, it's on the list. And what's it was called Skies Across America or
Skies of America.
And it was orchestral recording in the studio too. Tony Clark was the engineer, and the two of us we were probably the only two on the staff that knew who Ornette Coleman was, and we were like dumbfounded. Oh my God, you know, we're going to get up tomorrow morning and be in the studio with Ornette Coleman, what he was going to do. And of course, he never turned up until the very end. So, and it was only a day, so it was you know, 10 till 1, and then a break for lunch, 2:30 till 5:30. But during that time, you recorded both, you know, side one in the morning. So, and then he was going to take tapes back to America and put the sax down. But the orchestral recording, of course, was in itself quite special, just because it kind of floated. Is the only way I can describe it. I've never heard it since. It reminded me of those, and I don't know who does those arrangements. The John Lennon Number 9 Dream, which John kind of copied from Harry Nilsson, Pussycats' Too Many Rivers to Cross.
Yeah.
And the string arrangement, if you listen to Pussycats with Harry Nilsson, Too Many Rivers to Cross, and then go to Number 9 Dream, John kind of not copied, but he was there on, he used the same string thing. But I've never worked out who that arrangement is. And as soon as I heard it, so the Ornette Coleman would have been, it's probably about the same period, of course. Yeah, the Number 9 Dream is mid to late 70s, like 77, 78. So that's what they would do. That's what it was that kind of suspended string kind of shimmer that kind of never had any beat kind of thing.
Yeah, it's all about the different chords moving and the voices moving within the chord. And yeah, I worked with Ornette in 2000 on a chamber music project. So I was particularly interested to ask you about that, because he's one of the first jazz guys to really dive in with full-on classical and have the guts to hire the London Symphony. And
that's what it would have been. Yeah. And he just came in like the last half hour, and I think he had a black like drape coat on, kind of long, kind of almost like a funeral director's coat. It was kind of very long drape, and he looked immaculate.
He always did.
A little bit, yeah. And then he blew some sax over it and okayed it, liked it. And that was it. And they took the tapes, and I guess they did the rest of the recording in America.
Wow, that's incredible. So he did play over the orchestra, or played over takes?
He played over takes. No, he wasn't there when the orchestra recorded. He overdubbed. As I say, when all the orchestra had finished and gone, he came in. I guess it was morning, afternoon, and evening, and he just came in the evening, like 7 till 9, but he didn't do anything, what could you say, serious. It was all a sound check kind of thing, or a score check more than anything. Like,
okay.
I don't think it had been edited either, so this would have been on, I guess, 16 track.
Okay.
And so it wasn't all played in one go. There was, the tape would have to be edited, which we never did.
Would you have been responsible for miking the orchestra?
Not me, because I was just a tape op. No, Tony Clark was the engineer, had been responsible. But it was a standard thing. Okay. In Studio 2, it doesn't matter where you put the mic, it's going to sound good, believe me. And with any instrument, as amazingly enough, different things you can do. But no, the standard setup would be, well, you'd always have, now they use a thing called a Decca tree, which is a surround sound thing with 4 mics. But we only had two speakers in those days. So we would just have 2 87s or M50s. I think they're always the Neumann mics on high stands over the whole orchestra, over whatever's in the room kind of thing. And then when you listen, depending on what's playing, you can move them higher or lower, up or down. You could have some very distant, it doesn't really work having them too far away. You just have to put them in the right place and get something that's acceptable. And then every violin, depending how many there were, would be mic'd in pairs. So if there's 24 violins, you'd have 12 mics and put the mic between them, and it'll pick up the 2 of them. Cellos, you would just individually mic. It's nothing, and it was almost like a standard setup. And as I say, in that room in Studio 2 at Abbey Road does have a magic sound that no matter where you put the mic, you're going to get something happening. It's going to sound like good and quality and special.
Well, if you're going to bake a cake, you want to start with the right ingredients and fresh eggs and
that's it,
all the right flavors, right? And then you can go from there.
That's it.
There's a few things that were happening around that time that maybe you would recall. Do you recall doing a session with Griffin?
I do vaguely again remember doing a session with Griffin, and this is a funny one because I know I've got my name on the record. I remember, I think I've got a copy of the record, and it's got my name about 4 or 5 times. Like every song, they credit the engineer, kind of thing. No, it was in Studio One, which is the very big orchestral studio, you know, with the 4-second reverb. And the producer was a guy called Mike Thorne, who at the time worked for EMI. He was like an EMI house producer. He was a kind of journalist who somehow blagged this job of being a producer when there was all these, I guess, engineer producers like me who'd actually made records. But he came in, I guess, 76, 77, and he did that record live at the Roxy with all the punk bands, with X-Ray Specs and all those people, and then he did Wire, and I think he like A&R'd and recorded the 2 or 3 Wire albums, which were on Harvest. He did a Soft Machine album, and I'd done the one before.
You did 6 and 7, right?
I did the Softs, yeah.
Yeah, 6 and 7.
Is that what it is? I don't know.
I think there was those 2, but
it's just the one I did is just called the Softs. Not bundles, it's after bundles. So I don't know how many there are on the Harvest label, maybe 2 or 3. He did a live record which had a kind of live in Paris, which he mixed, which became the one after the one I did. But the one I did was called the Softs, and it's got kind of blurred neon lights on. And the first day, me and Pat Stapley, I was, you know, engineer and stuff, and it was after I'd done Bebop Deluxe. I'd also been producing, but I wasn't employed as a producer. I was just as the house engineer, really. And the day they turned up, the first thing we did is go to the pub. We all sat in the pub and then a chat and everything. And they all shook hands. And Mike Ratledge, obviously this was his going away party, because he shook hands with everyone and said goodbye. And he was the only original member. Mike Ratledge was the keyboard, was the organist, you see. And yeah, so he announced he was leaving the band, and that was it. So it was down to Carl Jenkins, John Marshall, Roy Babington, and John Etheridge was the guitarist. And they got some pieces together, but they never really had any direction. You know, it was like they would play a sequence like 4 times round, and then another sequence 2 times round, and then back to the first sequence, almost like a 12-bar blues or something, in a repetitive kind of riff, kind of serial systems kind of thing. And then they'd do the take, and this was all done live, of course, with no click, you know, and I didn't know what to expect, of course. And they'd stop, and when it got to the end, they'd say to me, "How was that, John?" You know, and I became the producer because they were asking me how the take was and blah, 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 and what I felt about it. And, you know, it turned into a co-production thing just because there was no one else there and no one else making decisions, really, or no one else looking at the watch and thinking, you know, we've got to finish by Friday, you know, we've got to get the album recorded and mixed by Friday, you know. So that's how I learned to produce, was doing sessions like that in a way.
Right, the zone between engineer and producer starts to close.
Yeah.
And did you also work with Kevin Ayers?
Yeah, as a tape op, yeah, Kevin Ayers and the Whole World with I've forgotten his name now. Mike Oldfield. Yeah, Mike Oldfield was the guitarist, and he was young. He was 16 or 17 at the time. And all he did, he never had any shoes. He just wore the same clothes all the time, the old T-shirt. Hardly spoke to anyone, and just smoked spliff all the time. Smoked a joint all the time. And but when he played, of course, he was excellent. You know.
And he's playing with his weird finger technique.
Yeah, all that. Well, there was so much else going on with Kevin Ayers and the Whole World, because there's Lowell Coxall, who was the sax player, who was pure jazz, and I knew he was the star more for me, because I sort of knew, I followed that kind of music. You know, I knew that Lowell Coxall was the special one there, and David Bedford was the keyboard player, who did lots of string arrangements for nearly all of the Harvest artists. So he was always in as a string arranger for Roy Harper and Edgar Broughton. And so he was the keyboard player. And I can't remember the drummer. They had a crazy drummer. And then Kevin, who just had a bottle of red wine and a girlfriend and a joint, and his guitar. And that's all he needed, And they put the record's great. He got better, actually. I think he was going through I can't really comment what it was like because I was a tape op. But it was good session, good time.
I'm so glad to hear you mention Lowell Coxhill. I had a lot of fun working with Lowell with British guitarist Derek Bailey.
Oh yeah, funny you should say. Yeah, Derek Bailey. At Christmas, someone gave me his book, Derek Bailey Improvisations. Fantastic.
It's Nature and Practice. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Really got me into this whole idea. Well, it's just, you kind of go, improvisation. Yeah, I know that. I know what that's all about. But it's not until you read the book you realize everything is improvised, really. And what's the definition of improvisation? Improvisation, there's a chapter, improvisation and composition. So how do you write a song? You have to write a song, you have to start with improvisation, don't you? And then improvisation depends on whether you're alone or whether you have an audience, or whether you have your girlfriend with you, your friend or your enemy, or a whole audience, and you're still improvising, or you're sitting in your room alone improvising. It's fascinating, the whole subject. I was really enthralled with the book,
If you can find it, there's a BBC documentary of Derek in a series. Have you ever seen that?
No, I haven't. I've seen clips from it. I haven't seen the whole thing.
Hopefully it's out there somewhere, because he kind of turned the book into that mini series, I think. Yeah. So were you on the session for All Things Must Pass?
That's right. Yeah. That was one of the first things I did. So I started in February, and I guess April, around about this time of year, April, May, was the start of All Things Must Pass. That was quite, and it's 50 years ago. I think there's a box set coming out after this Plastic Ono Band that's just come out, which I did after. But there should be a All Things Must Pass box set coming soon, which should be mammoth.
Hours and hours. I mean, what were those sessions like?
Busy they were. Late night sessions, 4 in the afternoon till 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning. Although they never, when I looked at the dates of All Things Must Pass, they weren't they were consecutive, but it was never more than 3 days on the trot. It was always like 2 24-hour days and then a week off, and then 3 24-hour days and days off. So it wasn't like crammed up, but it was great, because for me, and I just started, I was obviously kind of nervous and meeting people. I wasn't nervous about the Beatles or about, George Harrison. I was a little bit nervous about Eric, but I just kept away from Eric. And I was more friendly with Badfinger, actually, because I was younger, and Badfinger, so I was 20, and I guess Badfinger were 21 or even 19. They were the same age as me, whereas all the others, all Beatles, were 25, 26, and that's quite a difference between being 20 and 26, So yeah, I instantly made friends with Badfinger, and but there were so many people on the session, there was always not enough headphones and different things, and people playing together. There's like Jim Price and Bobby Keys playing all the horn parts live with the track. There's 2 drummers, 2 bass players, what's his name, Bobby Whitlock, Billy Preston, and then Phil Spector, and then George, of course, and then Phil Spector.
And then Alan White and Ringo?
No, Jim Gordon, who was Derek and the Dominoes. So Jim Gordon was actually a session drummer way before Derek and the Dominoes. It was the whole of Derek and the Dominoes, really, on George's. So yes, it was a guy called Jim Gordon. and Carl Radel, as well as Klaus Voormann. There's Carl Radel as well, and Bobby Whitlock was the keyboard player and helped write a lot of the songs, did all the organ. A guy called Gary Wright who played piano as well. And it was funny because I'd done an interview about this All Things Must Pass, and it all kind of comes back. And there was this guy called John Barham, who was the arranger, and he'd been there from the beginning at George's house and been writing all the parts out, like, and the keys and all this kind of, like, keeping all the paperwork, as it were, together. And he was like the arranger, and so he was feeding Jim Price, Bobby Keys for the horn parts. He had them scored out, and he'd just give them the notes and these kind of things. And
so it's not the free for all that one might imagine.
No. It was there was demos kind of thing. No, it's not a free for all, but there was a lot of people, of course, and it all went down on 8-track. There's not 16. Yeah, it's all down on 8-track. All Things Must Pass. And
how did you do that? How did you split that up?
I'm not quite certain of the split, but sometimes it's based on one. Sometimes it's a stereo picture, I think. I've never seen the track layout. I can't remember, actually. I've never seen a tape box from that period. I've seen John Lennon tape boxes with the track split, but sometimes you would do a stereo. I mean, you've got two drummers, but you would do a stereo. I think you would put one drum kit on one track and one drum kit on the other, but you could just do a spread kind of thing, because obviously you don't want bass drums and things ping-ponging. It's a difficult one, or they would favor one drummer kind of thing and just have Ringo in the background or the other guy in the background. Probably you can tell when you listen to the record who plays, who's playing. You can pick Ringo out, and I think you can pick out Klaus Voormann as well on the bass, of the different bass parts. Each song, was one of them's featured. But yes, although it's 8-track, it's actually only 6-track or 7-track, because you have to leave a track spare for the vocal. You see, if you're going to go back and do the vocals, if you fill up the 8 tracks, you've got no tracks left. It's kind of like that. But what happened with All Things Must Pass is that George then went to Trident Studios with Ken Scott, and they had 16-track. So they transferred the 8-track to 16-track and put on all the Hare Krishna voices and stuff, and the strings as well. So the actual orchestral strings, funny enough, were recorded at Trident and not at Abbey Road, but simply because they had 16-track and we only had 8. The same thing happened with Medal with Pink Floyd, which I was a tape op on at the beginning for the following year, and that was done on 8-track at Abbey Road, and then we went to Air Studios and copied it onto 16-track and filled up the other 8 tracks really to make it, and then you had to mix it at Air. Well, it was actually mixed at Morgan, so you couldn't go back to Abbey Road because you couldn't play the tape. So Abbey Road was well behind with the track count, really. It stayed at 8-track till, I guess, it didn't get 16 until 1972.
That's a little surprising.
Yeah, whereas Trident and I think I don't know what this is. Maybe because Abbey Road was sworn to Studer, and Studer never really developed a 16-track A80. He never developed a 16-track till 71 or 72. Whereas the others were using, Trident and Air were using 3M or even what's it called? The other one, Ampex. Yeah, I think Trident had an Ampex, and there was a 3M 16-track, but no one really liked the 3M 8 tracks that we were using. That's why they were reluctant. This is real geek stuff. They were reluctant to buy the 16-track 3M. Because the 8-track 3M caused them so much problems, because the tape used to bounce if you were spooling, because if you were fast spooling a tape, you'd control it backwards and forwards so it doesn't go full speed, but that you have to be really efficient and get to the end, get to your spot. It might be like 20 minutes you got to spool, so you want to go as fast as possible, but not so it goes out of control. And sometimes it would bounce on the runners, and sometimes it would just bounce off, just, and that happened. If that happens once, you never let it happen again, because the feel of the machine. But they were notorious, the 3Ms, for breaking tape and that kind of thing. And I think also the other problem that they had, maybe I'm wrong, is with ADT, they because the head is like a loop, so the record head's here and the playback head's there, so there's a good half second, I guess, 7.5 if you're running at 15, because you can run at 30. So there's 7.5 inches from the record head to the playback, so you've got half a second delay. And when it's the studio straight together, it's a much smaller delay. Whether that makes any difference, I don't know. But the 3Ms were often breaking down, and buttons, you push the button, boom, and the button would spring off, and you can't stop it because this, those sort of things. It's nightmare,
John, you mentioned
years, hours and hours running the tape. And it's funny because people, Rack Studios, phoned me up some time ago now, actually, but they had a lot of requests for people wanting to use tape. So they've got their old tape machines, and people, we want to record on tape. And they phoned me up and said, do I know any tape ops, any good tape ops? Because the young engineers have never run tape. They know anyone can press stop and start, but you do it for 12 hours a day at the whim of someone that wants it as fast as a computer. Stop, second verse, sing a line, stop, go back, drop in, do it again. No, do it again, go back, drop in, and drop out. Don't drop out, you can't, there's no redo button, And people would just fuck up, and people would be off sessions, and the studio would get into a problem because they haven't got staff who are capable of doing tape op duties, which are really non-stop, for the whole session.
Yeah, people think, oh, you're pressing a start and stop button. How hard could that be? You're just back there. So, yeah, right.
15 hours a day with a load of crazy people shouting at you.
Do you have any recollections from the Badfingers stuff?
Not really, no. I think Mal Evans, it's the song No Matter What, with the No Matter What You Are, with the Leslie guitar. Mm-hmm. I think Mal Evans produced that. He had the tape of it, and I can remember playing it in the studio. Maybe he was working at Apple. I don't think Apple Studio was working, but he had the tape, and he'd often, at the end of the session, 8 o'clock in the morning, now to say, oh, can we play our Badfinger tape? Can we play ours now? And it was an 8-track, and that was No Matter What.
Wow.
But it was an 8-track. It wasn't a mix kind of thing.
Right. So any recollections of Phil Spector on All Things Must Pass?
He was great, really. I mean, he was recollections. He was great. Best dressed person, of course. He always had his shades on, always the shades, and lots of stories to tell. He was in control of the session. I mean, he didn't touch the mixer. I mean, he didn't touch the equipment, but he told the engineer what to do, told Phil what to do, and if something was changed or not different, he'd often say, "Oh, the guitars are changed" or something. And he'd also be telling people what to play, if people embellished. It was just normal production. I realized when I start doing it myself, mm-hmm. After like take 3 or take 4, the keyboard player would do a different chord shape, and you'll kind of go, hang on, that's not, that chorus doesn't sound as good as what it did before. And you'd work it out, and you'd realize it's the keyboard player is playing a different chord shape, or someone's up whatever. And I can remember Phil Spector being very aware of all the parts that were going on, and, you could recognize, I think what I learned from that, and which of course you do learn if you're in the studio, is how to recognize a good take, how to recognize when it's good and when it's not good enough, and also when you should pack up and go home, or when you should take a day off, or when you should do another song. Come on, you're really happening now, you know. Finish the lyric, go and do that vocal, but just finish the lyric or something, you know. So that kind of I think when you're when you sit on so many sessions, you do learn how to recognize a good take, you know, and what you can patch up. I mean, the dream is not patching up, and very often you do patch up and it's not as good. So, you know, every song, every recording is different anyway. It's all got different values, really.
Yeah, you're not looking for the same thing to define what a good take would be. So can we assume that this All Things Must Pass box set will have many, many takes that you're talking about of different things?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I don't know how they. To be honest, I did hear the My Sweet Lord version, which was there is a My Sweet Lord remix. Didn't think it was very good. They've got this thing now with the Beatles, is that they want all the effects taken off, like John Lennon, and even particularly All Things Must Pass album, because everyone says, oh, there's too much reverb. Phil Spector, he soaked it in reverb and things. Well, that's what it is, and you take it off, and it never, to me anyway, it never sounds as good. It never sounds as, you know, these things are enhancements, you know, really.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't understand this thing with John Lennon of, Let It Be naked and doing, what's it called? Double Fantasy stripped back. Have you ever heard that? It's the most awful thing I've ever heard, because...
I mean, I'd hear it just to understand what they're going for, because essentially what you're doing is talking about pre-produced.
Yeah.
Do I want to hear pre-produced?
Yeah.
And compare it. Maybe in a class I would play you the produced and the not produced.
Yeah.
You can talk about what's going on in there.
Yeah. But it's like when Beatles Anthology came out, you know, you knew why they were outtakes, why they didn't use them. You know, you could tell that they just weren't as good as what they did use, you know, for different reasons. You know, either the vocal didn't make it, or it was too fast, or there was some change. But you knew that the version you've heard before, or the version that you're used to, is the best version, you know.
You know, that's an interesting period too for George, because this is a kind of his coming out from the Beatles, and it's a huge project. What was his demeanor like in that situation?
He was great, really. I mean, he was quiet and encouraging. You know, he obviously he was centre stage and everyone, but he wasn't centre stage the way Phil Spector was centre stage, or the way, you know, other members of the band, you know, and different people, you know, like Bobby Keys, big Texan, would come in with his sax in the control room, you know, and think nothing of just blowing his sax along with the playback. You know? Anyway, but no, George would often be in the corner, and I mean, everything focused on him. You know, he was always with his guitar. Again, even on the playback, they would come in, and often George would keep his guitar, be strumming with it and telling people different things. It was a big creative buzz, really, each song, you know, and a lot of different people playing there, you know.
What was George's interaction with Phil Spector like?
It seemed good. They were having a lot of fun. Yeah, it was all a lot of fun. I mean, there was no kind of heavy scenes or arguments. There was often accusations of wasting time, because Phil Spector would start telling Lenny Bruce stories or stuff, you know, I don't know, LA traffic people, or I don't know what they were talking about, but often they would come in for a playback and talk for an hour or so, or Phil Spector would like hold court, as it were, and just tell stories, really, of different people, a lot of American entertainment people that I didn't really know, you know. Yeah.
And then you worked on Plastic Ono Band?
Yeah, so by September, I suppose, it was John and Yoko. Yeah, John and Yoko, Klaus and Ringo. And it was totally, it was much more relaxed and much more friendly, I suppose. Well, friendly is not the right word, really. It was just much more relaxed and open and things. And it started. I understand now that Phil Spector didn't come in until later on John's session. But I can remember him being there all the time. But then again, I didn't do all the sessions. Other people, there were other tape ops and other engineers working on Plastic Ono Band. I did do all of the Yoko record because I was there when they recorded the jam session, I suppose, where it came from. And basically, the three of them, John, Klaus, and Ringo, would play a fast blues and then a slow blues, and use up a reel of tape, and then you'd listen back and he'd choose the best bits, and that became Why and Why Not on the album. And also that one that's Dunga Dunga Dunga, Paper Shoes, isn't it? This is the Yoko album with some drum things. And we had this modified BTR tape machine that Eddie Klein had modified. And a BTR is the big sort of valve mono thing that actually went at 3 different speeds. It went 7.5, 15, and 30. It was one of the few machines at Abbey Road that went at 30, and you could have a vary speed on it. It was just a 1/4-inch mono, but Eddie Klein had built these extra heads on it, which were all aligned up on a runner and had outputs and amps and things. You had to have a separate box, and so you could add multiple delays, really, but it was all coming off one tape kind of thing.
Oh, that's so cool.
Returns, each head would have a return on the mixer. And you could wobble it, you could vary the speed and wobble it kind of thing.
Flanging.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, that's the phasing thing. That's if you run it at fast speed and get it come off the sync head. But no, the vary speed. But all that tumbling that's going on Plastic Ono Band, on Yoko's record, boom, 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 it's all tumbling over, it's all feedback and things. That was a lot, that was kind of them doing a mix, and again playing back 3, 4, 5, 6 times and choosing the best bits, and then editing them all down. And then each day they would come in, and what you had as a original 30-minute performance was edited, and you would end up with Yoko saying, I want this bit from here to here, but I want you to repeat it 3 times. So she was just like a sampler, really. It was just like, I want, I've got 4 bars and I want another 3 bars of those 4 bars kind of thing, and then switch to this section, It was like composing the song, but out of tape loops that originally came from a 30-minute jam. Anyway, they said between the two of them, they seemed to know what was going on. They were furiously talking, John and Yoko, while they were doing it, behind the mixer kind of thing.
So it's very collaborative.
Yeah. I don't know what Phil made of it at all. Phil Spector made of it at all. I don't know. He was just encouraging, he was good.
So did you also work on the first McCartney?
I was a tape op. For 2 sessions with John Kurlander, 2 daytime sessions. When I really can't remember much about it. That was really when I first started, like February, late February, March 1970. Which was maybe I'm Amazed. I can't remember the other track. Again, someone came out with the recording sheets and it showed my name on it, and I had this. My only memory of working with McCartney is being a bit terrified, a bit scared. I wasn't so terrified of George, but I was a bit terrified of Paul on his own with Linda.
Yeah.
And we're in Studio 2, and he was down in the studio, him and Linda. I think they had the dog with them and everything. But anyway, he was way down there. And they were making tea, and they had their own kettle, which was quite unusual at the time. You have your own kettle and your teapot. And I'm just standing there wondering what to do when the sessions start. And I look down and Paul's like, hey, hey, hey. So I go around, I go, what? He says, do you want a cup of tea? And I said, oh, yeah, please. He says, it's orange pico. Is that okay? Oh, yeah, that's fine. I'm this new boy, 20-year-old new boy, you know, and Beatles asking me if I want orange pico, you know. So anyway, he says, oh, tea's ready, come down. So I go down the stairs. And of course, I've never had orange pico, and I think it's going to be bursting with orange. I think it's like fucking hot orange juice or something. But of course, it's just orange pico. And I think, has he given me the right? Is this really the orange pico tea? Because it didn't taste of orange juice. That's all I remember of the session. But yeah, he was. And then of course he wouldn't have remembered me. And then I did Red Rose Speedway tracks for that. I did High High High. Well, first of all, I mixed Sea Moon, which he'd done, Sea Moon, and which he'd done at Morgan Studios. And he wanted to overdub hand claps, more hand claps, which of course are a nightmare to do. Hand claps are very difficult to get a good sound on unless it's happening. Anyway, we overdubbed hand claps, and then he wanted to mix it, and we spent a day doing that, and then he came in with the band with High High High. And of course, when the band showed up, they were high, high, you know, they were just like a bit boozy and stuff, a bit boozy more than anything. And they just come back from Wings Across Europe, which was not Wings Across America. So they'd done this Wings Across Europe tour, and they were in touring mode when they got in the studio. And I guess I think someone said I did 67 takes of High 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 spread over 4 days, and they would come in, you know, for the whole, you know, a 12-hour day and do this song, which is pretty simple kind of rock and roll. Well, again, I met you at the station, you know. And we finally got the take, and he did all the vocals, and you know, I mean, it was a 10-day, I suppose, session. But during that time, I also did different things on Red Rose Speedway, which was the medley, Lazy Dynamite, which wasn't very good because it was just Paul on piano, and a lot of the time the band were waiting to play. So every time you did a take, Paul would he needed a producer really, and I was just starting engineering. I was really a tape op. I didn't really know how to direct them because I wasn't a producer, but he did need a producer on those sessions.
I'm very curious of recollections of your time working with Syd Barrett.
Again, I don't remember much about it. I was a tape op on Barrett on the second album, which was Roger and I don't know if Dave. Yeah, it was Roger and Dave Gilmour producing, but it was mainly Roger. I can't remember all the lineup now. Again, it was really early 1970 or 71 in July. Yeah, difficult to get tracks down with Syd all the way through. I mean, he tried playing with other musicians and then recording himself and putting the drums on after, which of course never works. And then let me see. And then I with Peter Jenner, who was a producer. Now Peter Jenner was Black Hill Enterprises, and he put on all the gigs in the Park concert, and he managed all these bands. I don't know how he did it all, and produced them all. So he managed and produced records with Roy Harper, Edgar Broughton Band, Kevin Ayers. Who else? There was a band called formerly Fat Harry, who he did. Third Ear Band. He didn't produce Third Ear Band, but he managed them, and all these Harvest acts. He had a block deal with Harvest Records for the underground from 1968 onwards. Really, he was the head of the UK underground. Really, but yes, Pete, of course, had known Syd because Pete, they started off managing the Floyd, Pete Jenner and Andrew King, and Black Hill managed Pink Floyd, and that's how they knew Syd. And I think when the Floyd dropped Syd, Black Hill dropped the Floyd, but tried to keep Syd busy and promote Syd, but of course Syd wasn't really capable. And then there was a period, I think it was 1974, and Pete Jenner phoned me up and said, we're going in the studio with Syd, just him on his own. And he wants to make a record in a week. And the first day he's going to play guitar and play the songs, all the 10 songs. And then the next day he's going to play all the bass. And the third day he's going to play all the keyboards. And then on the fourth day he's going to do all the vocals. Oh yeah, for the whole album. Yes, this is what we're going to do. And Syd turned up with all new guitars. I mean, all the guitars were still in their boxes with labels on, you know. And he had the drum kit and everything you needed to be a band, you know, drum kit, bass, amps and stuff. And again, it was very difficult to get songs down, really. And all he really had was blues, kind of slow blues, boogie, John Lee Hooker type shuffles and these kind of things. And the tapes on the internet, I don't know how these tapes get out, but you know, there's if you go on YouTube, you can see Syd Barrett's last session, and it's just you know, it's like a de-eyed guitar, because he didn't want to hear himself either. He wanted to play electric, but he didn't want to hear himself. And if he mic'd him up or however you did it, he would turn it off like the amp. He didn't want to hear it in the room. So, okay, so we just de-eye the guitar and put it in his headphones and that kind of thing. And it was like, can you turn it off the headphones? You know, he doesn't know. Or Syd, why don't you just take the headphones off? Anyway, he said, like, can you turn it off the headphones? So different things like that. And then he'd get bored and just walk out, really. And we'd see in Studio 3, the old Studio 3, you could see the crossing, the famous Abbey Road crossing. And from the window where you sat, you could see the crossing and the people. And Syd would go, oh, can I take a break? And you go, sure, Syd, yeah, come back. And you'd look out and you'll see Syd walking over the crossing, going up to the station. So that was the end of that, you know. And that went on for a week, and you didn't know if he was going to show up the next day. He did. He showed up every day.
He showed up every day?
Yeah, by himself. But there's all sorts of stories. If you read your Syd Barrett biographies, you know, all those things. And Brian Morrison was paying for the hotel room for years, apparently. Had been paying for different hotel rooms and renting apartments. Brian Morrison was a publisher and was generally looking after Syd. And he was always trying to give Syd money, and Syd thought that he was asking for money. It's like, no, Syd, this is your money. Here's £100, Syd. Go and buy some food, Syd. This is your money. No, I don't want your money. No, it's your money. I'm giving it to you. These kind of things. And apparently he bit off Brian Morrison's finger. They had a fight, and Syd bit his finger off or something. This is the story. Anyway, I can't really comment about Syd. I know I've got my name there, and I did it, and these kind of things, but in terms of like communication, it was there wasn't really any.
Now, had you, in all the shows you went to as a youngster, had you seen the Floyd with Syd?
I had, yeah, International London Free School, which was 1966 at Paris Terrace. There was again, which was set up by John Hopkins and Peter Jenner. They had a thing called the London Free School, which during the day was a school for children, and in the evenings it was a kind of art centre where they would show underground films. This is all near Portobello Road, Notting Hill Gate area of London. And the Floyd would play, and word was out. This is right when Cream were formed, I remember. Because we had this choice of going to see Cream, who we'd already seen and didn't think was that good. We'd seen Cream at Cook's Cleek, and everyone said, "Oh, should we go to Cook's Ferry Inn and see the Cream again, or go and see this weird group, the Floyd, with the light show?" And it was cheaper to get in at the London Free School. It wasn't free, and that was when they had the light show, a San Francisco light show thing going on. And it was, I don't know if you know, International Times was a weekly, it became weekly kind of underground magazine, a bit like Village Voice kind of happening,
Right.
but it was much more political and much more, not anarchist, but it had all sorts of things. It was the underground newspaper, and they were the London Free School as well. And then they became UFO with Joe Boyd,
Oh, yeah.
you know, Joe Boyd and running the UFO Club and Middle Earth and the whole sort of hippie thing from 66, 67, really. But yeah, it was all kind of based around Portobello and, for us anyway, Portobello Road, the market there. Yeah, that's where I saw the Floyd, and I'd seen the Floyd at various colleges, let me think, well, mainly at festivals, really. Hampstead Heath Festival and Atom Heart Mother in Hyde Park was really good. I can tell you that Atom Heart Mother, again, I just started Friday, February. No, this must have been the summer of 1970, because it was a concert, Atom Heart Mother. This is before Medal. Yeah, that's right. They mixed. When I started, they were mixing Atom Heart Mother with Alan Parsons.
Wow, yeah.
Peter Baum had recorded it, and Alan had just come up. He'd been there a few years before me, 2 years before me. So Alan at that time was just becoming an engineer and was mixing Atom Heart Mother. So this is summer of 1970, and the Floyd were performing Atom Heart Mother with the brass band, with the brass and the choir in Hyde Park. And word came out Friday afternoon that they wanted 24 music stands and chairs for the orchestra on stage by 11 o'clock in Hyde Park. And could someone do it? And I said, yeah, I'll do it. So me and this van driver, we had to hire a van and drive to Hyde Park. And we had the whole day backstage while they did Atom Heart Mother, because of course they were last on, and then count the 24 music stands and the chairs, and that was my gig. But that was, you know, and of course with the Floyd, I'd seen them around the studio as well and doing different things, and because of the Black Hill and Peter Jenner connection, Roy Harper as well. So I was always on Roy Harper sessions, Edgar Broughton, those, you know, and Kevin Ayers sessions, because that was my street level thing, you know, from the underground and Portobello and stuff, you know.
So what was it like seeing the Floyd with Syd at their peak?
I can't remember much about it. 1966, 54 years ago. I can't remember an awful lot, other than all I can remember is the light show is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. The
So
Floyd.
Syd was into it. He was performing at that time. You saw him?
I think, yeah. This is 66, right after Arnold Lane, or even See Emily Play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was the singles. They hadn't done album. They hadn't done Piper at the Gates of Dawn, and it was loud. It was loud. You know, you got to remember in those days, the volume. You know, going to a gig and it's loud. It was bloody great. You know, because you just, you know, and very often you'll get down the front for the purpose of exposing yourself to that loudness. You know, but what were they like? All I can remember from the Floyd really was the organ, the Farfisa or the Vox Continent, whatever he had, the Vox organ with the tremolo, maybe, you know, and that kind of. I can remember the organs, every song being the same because of the organ, but maybe that's just the PA balance.
Yeah, where you were.
And the other thing that was very funny was because it was called the London Free School, and it was actually a children's school where this gig was. There was a stage all around. It was like a nursery, so there was all these kids' drawings and everything, and there was all these little chairs, little nursery chairs that the kids would sit on. So of course, when we went in, people often sat on the floor. Everyone was sitting on these little children's chairs, and that was the other thing I always remember about the gig. And I got friends. I still know friends who I went with, and they go, "Hey, do you remember those chairs?" Yeah, it was weird.
Well, you didn't remember much about the music, but I like that chair reference.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, but didn't you work as an engineer on Pink Floyd "Wish You Were Here"?
Kind of. I probably shouldn't say that I did, but I did. I started off the session for Wish You Were Here because it was a new studio in Abbey Road. So the Studio 3 in Abbey Road, they just installed a Neve mixer, one of the big Neve mixers. In fact, it was the biggest Neve in the world at the time, kind of wraparound Neve. Because before that, it was all EMI mixers. It was what's called TG mixers. And so this was the new studio. The whole room was renovated with new speakers and everything. Even had plants and things growing and lights on dimmers and things, which they'd never had before. And this was a new studio, and I was appointed because I'd worked with Roy Harper and David Gilmour. I had nothing to do with Dark Side of the Moon, but they were always in and out in the studio, and you'll see them in the canteen and in the corridor. And David Gilmour, I did some tracks. I did some mixing really with Sutherland Brothers and Quiver. David Gilmour would often come in with various things. And he said, would you like to do the next album? But we haven't got any songs. And I said, yeah, okay. But we've got this new mixer, and they wanted to be first in using this new mixer. And of course, no one had worked it before. It was literally, they didn't put the power on until the night before. And no one really knew what all the buttons did or anything. But it was all seemed to work. And the Floyd set up, and they were in there for the next, I don't know, months on end. So no one could really get in there and do maintenance or find out exactly how the mixer worked, whether it was working correctly. And it was. But anyway, so I set up the whole studio with the band for them playing, and recorded early takes of Shine On You Crazy Diamond, really, with the whole band playing. And then Brian Humphreys turned up, and unknown to me, because the Floyd don't announce anything like that, they were having Britannia Row built. Britannia Row was their studio. And Brian Humphreys was in charge of building this Britannia Row studio and also doing their live sound. And he turned up and said, oh, hello, like one morning, and said, oh, hello, I'm the Pink Floyd's engineer, and I literally said, no, you're not, I am. And he said, well, the Floyd have asked me, and it wasn't until they came in did they explain, oh, yes, we never told you, John, yeah, Brian's taking over. And it was this kind of, oh, yeah, okay. And of course, there was a dilemma with Abbey Road because they didn't, at that time, they didn't allow outside engineers to work there. The only people that could work there were Jeff Emerick or Ken Scott, really, like old people that had been there before. And of course, Brian Humphreys had never worked there. So they didn't really, there was a bit of a hoo-ha, and I had to stay on. Will you be the engineer? You have to look after him. It's a new studio. We don't know, can't have a stranger working. The studio is not tested. So I carried on for a bit, for a day or two or something, and just went off and did a Roy Harper record because Roy was down the corridor and wanted to start his record. So there's no shortage of work, it's like, if I'm not going to do the Floyd, I'll do this,
So Roy being down the corridor, he came in to sing Have a Cigar on Wish You Were Here.
Correct, yeah. They were in Studio 3 and we were in Studio 2. Often the way, yeah. And so, you'd often nip in and out of different studios. The Floyd always had a bar. They always had a fridge with beer in, with beer and Coca-Cola, which is a rarity at Abbey Road because they never had a bar or anything at Abbey Road. You had to bring your own in. And of course, the Floyd bought their own, through experience, bought their own fridge and stuff. It was different in those days, working in the factory. It was a factory, really.
And you went on to do a lot of work with Roy Harper.
Yeah, I think I did 6-7 albums with Roy, really. He started with Life Mask. Well, I tape hopped on Stormcock, which is his best record, really, Stormcock. And then Life Mask, I engineered, mixed everything with Peter Jenner producing. And if Peter Jenner wasn't there, then just carry on, with Roy. And different people would come in, Jimmy Page and Keith Moon and, synthesizers. We used to, when the VCS3 and various synths, the Moog, the VCS3, What was that other one? The Oberheim, the ARP 2600. Roy wanted to use all those things, so we would hire them, and I'd have to find out how they worked, and how you get a tune out of them, and those kind of things. And then I'm like, I don't know, the VCS3 kind of thing. I knew a bit. I knew about oscillators and synths, so it was a continually expanding sort of idea. And we got a guy called was it Roger Hodgson or Brian Hodgson? I think it was Brian Hodgson, who worked from the Radiophonic Workshop and was also part of that David Warhouse White Noise record. I don't know if you know that. What's it called? Dark Storm in Hell or something. No, it's called White. It's called White Noise.
White Storm, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, the guy from that, he came down and showed us how the VCS3 got a sound and everything. But they're always a nightmare in those days, since, because they went out of tune and you couldn't, you used to get your sound, and then by the time you had to get it on tape and press record, it had all moved, the sound had changed. And if you didn't like a bit and you come back and want to drop it in with the same sound, you can't get it the same. So all those things, you learn all those things. The Mini Moog, it wasn't until Mini Moogs really that it all got very stable and proper.
And even then, only a little bit more so.
Yeah. But and the Floyd had the 2V on Dark Side of the Moon on the Run, with the sequence. They had two VCS3 what they call synthy ones, the suitcase ones with the blue keyboard. I used to sit for hours, and you could just play your sequence, press record, play your sequence, press play, and it would just repeat and speed it up, slow it down, and shift the octave, and it was hours of fun. And and we thought they were toys. It was funny. We thought they were toys, and then I remember Pete James came and said, "Hey, that VCS3 in the suitcase? The Floyd are using it on their record. Can you believe it? They're actually using this toy on their record."
That's very funny. I would love to talk to you about Bebop Deluxe. Bebop Deluxe came into my consciousness in America, and I think it was sort of their breakthrough in America with modern music. 1976. I would have been 12 or 13. But you started working them right from the get-go, when they were more of kind of like a glam or even punk kind of unit. Is that true?
Yeah, it was before punk, really. I mean, it was all before punk.
Proto-punk.
Proto-punk, yeah. It wasn't even the attempt. It's more Roxy Music when you say glam. It was more an attempt of being, it wasn't an attempt. It's just the way Bill Nelson was. But yeah, I first met Bill. He came in with Axe Victim, which was the first album to mix. And the producer never turned up. It was an EMI house producer. Ian McClintock was the producer who'd done all the recording. I think a lot of it was recorded at Air Studios. And he booked a weekend, a Saturday and a Sunday, to mix. And I said, and I hadn't really heard, I never had a record out, Bebop Deluxe. That name, that sounds good. I'll do that weekend. You put your name down in the diary to do it. And he just came in with the tapes and said, and Ian McClintock phoned up and said, "I'm sorry, I'm busy this weekend. I didn't know the sessions were on." He's a fucking producer, and he's mixing the album, and he didn't know the sessions were on. Anyway, we mixed the album Axe Victim, and that was it. And then I never saw Bill again. And then I just got a call, or I'd sort of asked about him from EMI and different people at EMI. And then I got a call a year or so later asking if I would co-produce their next album with Bill, and the two of us do it together. And of course I said yes, and that was Sunburst Finish. And so and in between, of course, he'd done Futurama with Roy Thomas Baker at Rockfield.
Now, you didn't work on Futurama?
No, not at all. That was all done with Roy Thomas Baker at Rockfield and that other studio I can't remember what it's called now. So it was Axe Victim, really. And basically me and Bill just met up and we had a chat. And was there demos? I can't remember if there were demos, really. I'd certainly never rehearsed with them. But the band came in and were really, really together and really hot, and it was just like ready to go. And we recorded between Studio 2 and Studio 3 at Abbey Road. That's a few days in 2 and a few days in 3. And let me see, with Sunburst finished, yeah, and we just really hit it off and had great time. And I think we did something at Air as well, Air Studios mixing. I think Andrew Powell did the strings or something. Andrew Powell worked a lot with Kate Bush. This is all in that period. Yeah, we just hit it off, and then every year or seemed like every 6 months really, Bill would be on the phone saying, "Oh, I'm doing another record, I'll send you the demos or something." So then it was modern music, and then the live album, I think, Live in the Air Age. So I then went out with this. That's when I discovered the Rolling Stones mobile, because we went out with the Rolling Stones mobile and recorded, I think, 6 or 7 gigs, big gigs, Hammersmith Odeon, of Bebop Deluxe around the country, and picked the best and mixed, tried to overdub, couldn't really. So everything on Bebop Deluxe Live in the Air Age is as it happened. There's no overdubs.
Oh, well, I wanted to ask you about that because as a producer, I do a lot of live recording production. And that's something that I really enjoy, only because I feel like there's a different energy with live performances, right? So what kind of stuff were you running into with mobile at that point? Because it's sort of new to record that way live, is it?
Well, yeah, mid 70s. I mean, this would have been 1975, 75, 76, I suppose. And the Stones truck was built for Exile on Main Street, 1972 or 3. It was it was a Helios desk on an army base. It was, I don't know what the width of it would be. The width of the mix is like 10 foot, I suppose. Enough for the desk and a little alleyway to move. And 2 3M 24-track machines, so that you, when as one machine was running out, you would start the second machine. They both, 2 machines with the same input. So, when you get to near the end of the tape, you just start the other reel and so on. And Revoxes, and it was the Stones. It was all Neumann mics and Shure and proper speakers, and it was great because you could shut the door, turn the speakers full on deafening, and outside you wouldn't hear anything. Just hear like a rumble or something. It was very soundproof, the whole thing. And it was the only mobile that has a window, and it's got a big double glazed window with Venetian blind. Because all the other mobiles at the time, because I spent a lot of time with the Stones mobile, and it was the only one with a window that you could look out. So if you're stuck inside a mobile, Memphis Blues again. If you're in a mobile for 3 weeks, you want a window to look out 12 hours, especially if you can't open the door, So yeah, I did, and then we went to we did Drastic Plastic, which was in the south of France. So we'd done all these records, and the band were like, can't we record somewhere different to Abbey Road? Can't we go somewhere really nice, like south of France, and like the Stones did? And we go, like, oh yeah, okay, I'll make some phone calls. So I phoned up the Stones office and said, "Do you got any castles, any houses to do a record with your mobile?" Yeah, I can. So I flew down there, checked out a few houses, as you do with the Stones secretary, and we'll have this one, the Chateau Saint Georges in Juan-les-Pins, near Cannes, between Cannes and Nice, near Antibes, 2 minutes from the Mediterranean. It was fantastic. We went there for the whole of May, and it was the Cannes Film Festival, so we could walk down the La Croisette and part with all the film stars. It was fantastic. We were there for nearly 2 months, 7 weeks we were there. And there was, every night, 14 of us would sit down to dinner, and the wives and girlfriends were cooking and stuff. And we used to get, the roadie or the tour manager used to go to the bank in Antibes on a Monday morning and collect £1,000 from EMI. That was our money for the week. to pay for all our food and stuff and whatever was needed. So they would go to the supermarket and spend £200 on food and £200 on booze, and we'd still have £600 to spend. So we'd buy, marijuana, weed or something from some contact we'd have. And then we'd go to the restaurants, the best restaurant, and spend £400 on eating out, and then next week do it again. But yes, we did it was good time that.
So presumably then modern music did well for them?
It did, I think, yeah. And they never, it did well. EMI came up with the Advance. I think they're very good, very strong management, and EMI came up with the Advance, and the band, there were no hit records. There were Ships in the Night, which was kind of, I don't know what the highest, number 12, number 15 was their single from Sunburst Finish, Ships in the Night. But there was no other real hit single, really.
So Made in Heaven or one of those?
Maybe, yeah, that was earlier on. Yeah, they always showed promise, but I think Bill got, what can I say? Bill probably got a bit introverted, and he didn't want to be commercial. He purposely wanted to not confuse his audience, but challenge his audience, I suppose, with either lyrics or, playing. I mean, it was all great stuff, but it wasn't radio play. He shunned radio play. I don't want to be played on the radio, which is all a different thing, and then he toured America. It was all about touring and overwork, really, as well, you're on a 6-week tour of America, and you've got a week to write an albums of songs, and then you're in the studio for 6 weeks recording those songs.
I remember modern music breaking through in New York. The song was on heavy rotation.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I always thought they were cool, but I'm also really interested in Bill Nelson as a musician, because he goes on to do Red Noise, and you're involved with a lot of his post Bebop Deluxe productions. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about those.
Well, as I say, we became quite close friends, really, and our family. I had a baby, he had babies, and we sort of, wives, and we used to go and stay with each other. And when it became Red Noise, Bill again just had these songs. We didn't converse or anything. He suddenly said, "Oh, here's a new record," and EMI went with it. Really, I wasn't really a part of the breakup of the band and everything. He did that, and then he did his solo record, "Quit Dreaming and Get on the Beam," which was his after the Red Noise thing, which didn't really take off, and then he did solo record "Quit Dream," which is really great, actually. "Quit Dreaming and Get on the Beam," and we did that in a little hall, a village hall, like a small hall up in Yorkshire near where Bill lived, again with the Stones Mobile. So it was just me and him and the Stones Mobile with everything, and just Bill playing, really. With he more or less played everything. I mean, conventional, there's no click or drum machine, or there was some tracks with drum machine, but it was really Bill playing drums and bass and everything, and it sounded like a proper band. And then the EMI dropped him, and they never released it. And I think it never got released, that "Quit Dreaming and Get on the Beam." It came out on Phonogram or something, on Polydor, which is now Universal. So it's not an EMI record, and it charted, and it was quite a big selling record, and he had a few. It's great. That sounds great now. The "Quit Dreaming and Get on the Beam." There's really good tracks on there. "Living in My Limousine" is one. And "Do You Dream in Color" as well, of course, which was a great record, which he did because Bill was very kind of self-sufficient. Bill did his own video for "Do You Dream in Color," and he always had 8mm camera. He did loads of stuff like that. We both had these 8mm cameras, and he videoed himself doing the verses in black and white, and then he rented a video studio and did the choruses in color video, and then edited it. Well, then went in and edited it because he never had any home editing. He didn't have like Final Cut Pro or anything in those days, so he'd have to rent a video editing suite and cut it all together, you know. So yeah, do Dream in Color. It still comes up every now and again on, you know, it was a big MTV thing. And
he's an interesting guy. What do you keep in touch with him? Do you know what he's up to?
Yeah, we speak once a year. We always do Christmas cards. No, we speak. We don't speak often, not often enough. Cherry Red Records re-released the record, all of the Bebop Deluxe records as box set, and got someone to do new mixes and 5.1 mixes and things. But it's great with the old photos and everything. You've probably got it there.
Yeah, I have it here. The box.
Oh yeah.
You know, one of the things that I've heard about through my XTC interest is that Andy Partridge sought you out specifically because he liked the way the Bebop Deluxe records sounded. Am I correct?
I don't know. I don't know. I think so. He obviously, you know, he had a lot of respect for Bebop Deluxe and Bill Nelson. They've never met, I don't think. I don't think they've ever met. I've never managed to get the two of them together, you know. I don't know.
But do you have any idea what he was looking for when you started working on White Music with them, or the EPs? You know, was there something about like, oh, I like that drum sound, or I like that bass sound? No.
No, there's no reference to Bebop Deluxe. I don't think there ever is. Well, unless people are real fans, but no, there was never any reference or mention of Bebop Deluxe with XTC. It wasn't like that at all.
So how did you first meet up with Andy and XTC?
Through Virgin Records, really. I mean, just a call from Simon Draper at Virgin. Just the A&R guy at Virgin phoned me up and said, "There's this band." Sent me the cassette, and they were playing at the what's it called, the Nashville Rooms in Hammersmith in London. And went down there, and it was real punk rock. I've been to a few punk gigs before, but at that time it was pretty, you know, we're talking mid '76 really. Before the Sex Pistols record came out, maybe, I'm not quite certain. But yeah, it was very punky, gobby, pogoing, fights, beer thrown around everywhere at the stage. And that's how it was. It was terrifying. And of course, XTC come on a real, you know, rough. You know, they're real like, you know, angry, and is sweating, and you know, and Barry Andrews has got his beaten up organ, his Krumar organ with dog breath written on the back of it, you know, and you know, pushing it to the edge of the stage. They were great, you know, particularly Barry when he played this organ, and it was on a swivel. He had no top on it. And so very often when he did his solo or he'd push it to the edge of the stage, and the organ would be up, and he'd play it like this, and you could see all the inside of it, you know, and it was all like dirty with beer cans and stuff inside this electric organ, you know, that he was playing. It was quite sensational. And he had this little, it was called a Lawrence piano, and it was a mini upright, strung piano. It wasn't a toy, you know, it was like this mini upright. It's called a Lawrence, I always remember. And it had a pickup on it, and he used to plug a treble booster, a guitar treble booster, into where the pickup was. And when he hit the chord on the piano, it was really sharp. And then when Andy hit his guitar, you know, he had to compete. It's like ding, 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 you know, there'd be guitar, piano, guitar. And they would both have to be really kind of sharp and brittle and shiny, you know. And they were great. It was really, they really had their internal sound together, you know.
And you also, that's probably the first time you heard Terry Chambers and Colin Moulding as well.
Yeah, same thing. You know, really strong and driving, and you know.
How did they get on with the audience at that point?
The audience, early XTC, well, they're all just, the audience are just, they were used to it all, really. I mean, it was just, free for all, really, things being thrown and all that kind of thing, yeah. But, all the songs were, well, with XTC, all the songs were really great. They weren't straight ahead kind of punk songs,
No, they weren't.
No. Yeah, so what was the question?
So then how do you end up?
Bebop Deluxe.
Well, how do you end up in the studio recording white music, or what leads up to that? Because there were singles before the album.
Yeah, I did the 3D EP, which was Science Friction, and I'm Bugged, and I can't remember what else was on it. And it was an EP, and that was done at Abbey Road 3. And for some reason, it didn't come out sounding very good. I've sort of heard a remastered thing, but I was always hated the sound of it. And then then we did white music at the Manor Studios, which was a Virgin studio. And of course, I wasn't allowed. I was still employed by Abbey Road, and I wasn't allowed to work at other studios. And they wouldn't hire me out, So I literally, in secret, took my 2 weeks holiday and went to the Manor and recorded white music, the whole record, and mixed it all in 2 weeks. And unknown to Abbey Road, they thought I'd gone on holiday. Oh, do you have a nice holiday? Yeah, great. And I've been 2 weeks in the studio, And then I played it to Simon Draper, who loved it and said, well, when are you going to mix it? I'm going, well, we have mixed it. That's it. The band were there. We spent the last few days mixing all the tracks, No, you can't. That's too quick. You've got to go in and mix it again. Go in and mix it next week. So again, I had to take more time off Abbey Road out of my holiday time and go into Advision, and I mixed it by myself. So what you hear is actually my mix with no band, no one there. Although all I was trying to do was copy what we already had at the Manor. But yeah, the mix is so white music. And a lot of it was B-sides and unreleased stuff. There's different things, like there's a version of Fireball XL5, and there's what's it, Instant Tunes. There's just various songs that popped up as B-sides and different compilations. And it's like that came from the white music sessions,
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. Well, they were probably immediately prolific. Andy was cranking out tunes.
That's right.
So were you going into Go-To, were you working off of demos?
There were demos for Go-To, yeah. I think I still got a cassette of Go-To demos, yeah. We never rehearsed. They rehearsed without me or something. It was never suggested that I went to rehearsal. The demos were there. Not quite certain, but so what happened with Go-To was that I'm just trying to think now. I need to just they wanted me to record at the Townhouse, which was the new studio, the new Virgin studio in London. And again, I couldn't go. And that was me on the point of leaving Abbey Road. And when we went to the Townhouse on the first day, the studio wasn't ready. It wasn't, we actually, the band and everyone turned up, but because it was like Easter holidays, no one told the band, this is typical band communication in those days, no one told the band that the studio wasn't open, basically. It was open, but there was no mixer or no power on, and the guys was coming to fix it on Tuesday, and this was like Saturday, and so I knew that Abbey Road 3 was available, so I phoned up Ken Townsend, the manager, and explained the situation, and he said, of course, go and take the week there. So we literally on that day drove to Abbey Road and did the whole of Go-To in Abbey Road 3. And it's got a certain energy to it, the whole thing. I can't remember much about Go-To, actually, because there was all sorts of stuff and tensions with Barry Andrews wanting to do his songs, and you know, there was I don't know, I think there were two ended up on the record,
Two,
but
yeah.
we actually did another two or three or four. We did about five of Barry Andrews songs, and you know, some of them we used, we mixed them all, but and then Barry never came. I think he left before the record came out. I'm not quite certain of the history there. But yeah, there was a lot of tension between Andy and Barry through the record, and also there was a lot of touring commitments. You know, there was a certain tension. It wasn't as relaxed or as fun as what White Music was. I don't know. Maybe it was the tracks or maybe what was going on. But of course, and after that, when they then went with Steve Lillywhite, they did the best record, Drums and Wires. You know, which is
Sure. You know, and it's a new beginning, but there's something about those first two records that puts them in an interesting place in what's going on in
yeah,
1978,
hmm
because that's all 1978,
yeah,
and that's an interesting period. So, um, I think Go To it's sort of the preview to what they're going to get to on Drums and Wires,
yeah,
particularly songs like Beat Town,
yeah.
which is a favorite of mine from Go To,
Right, right.
and Super Tough.
Oh yeah, that's a Barry Andrews song, Super
Yeah,
Tough.
but Super Tough, you know, to me that fit in quite well.
Hmm
Um, so yeah, when you get to the next period, if it could be called that, um, I think that there were things that were retained from the early dynamic of the band, between, instead of guitar and keyboard, now it's the two guitars, and so they're going to be performing Beat Town with two guitars, and you know
Uh-huh.
it's so it's an interesting little crossroads.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So shortly after that, you were working with Andy on a record called Take Away Lure of Salvage.
Mm.
I'm fascinated by that record.
Some people are, yeah.
Yeah,
So when we did Go To, um, we did. I think we must have mixed Go To at the Manor because I can remember doing these dub sessions at the Manor. Maybe I'm wrong. Um, but yeah, when we did Go To, the went with the record. We was Go Plus, which was I think four dub versions of the songs that were on the record. But of course, what can I say? We're not Rastafari. You know, we didn't really understand dub really. I mean, we did what we thought, but we kind of took each song and tried to make it unrecognizable, really, just to dig into it, explore a whole new picture that didn't have any relevance to the original song, really. And that's how we did the Go Plus. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Um, but what happened, of course, is the record was originally the EP Go Plus was given away with Go To, and then later it was sold commercially. It was sold as a separate EP, and a lot of clubs were playing it because it was just kind of crazy beats and things. A lot of clubs were playing this Go To record, and so it got quite a lot of favour from that. And again, I don't know. Andy phoned me up one day and said, "Hey, you know, we did that Go Plus record, that dub. Do you fancy entering the world of dub for a couple of weeks at the studio?" So I said, "Yeah, yeah." So basically, I had all the tapes from all their records, which was my two records and Drums and Wires, and every day we would pick a track and basically destroy it and put it back together again, which was whichever took our whim and fancy. Whether it was, I don't think we played anything backwards, but we'd play things at different speeds and do things like make the bass drum into the snare drum. No sampling or a computer, it's all on tape. So just by EQ and general, maybe putting it through a guitar pedal, EQ make the bass drum sound like the snare drum, and then the snare drum like the bass drum or something, depending on the song. And very often the other favorite one is just have the tom-toms, particularly with XTC. You can take the snare, bass drum and hi-hat and everything out, and just have, and then gate the toms, and then put delay on them. And so you get this whole new pattern going on with spasmodic kind of tumbling tom-tom fills going on, and nothing else, silence, and then maybe you make the bass sound like a piccolo bass, bing, 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 or something, all those kind of crazy things. And it's great working with Andy doing that, of course. And he'd go out and read some poetry or write a whole new song. There's that song, what's it? New broom. I want a new broom to sweep it all clean. That one, which is Making Plans for Nigel slowed right down, like half speed. Making Plans for Nigel. I don't know. We just did it as whatever our whim for that day.
But it's fascinating to me for several reasons. One is that it does indicate what Andy's spoken a lot about, not just to me, but a lot about trying to copy something, dub in this case, and getting it wrong. Right? So there's that.
That's that.
Which is the case of anybody that tries to, necessarily, take something from another genre and do it when it's not you weren't Rastafarians. Then the other thing is, he's so smart to understand that he's got a plethora of great beats to work with.
Yeah.
Right? So in terms of beats, he has the human drum machine, Terry Chambers. Take any parts of those, process them. They're going to retain the groove quality or the cool rhythmic quality of them, right? And then you can process the shit out of it, cut it up, do whatever you want. So in a way, it's a very interesting kind of looking through your own, makeup, looking through your own, material to then reimagine it in a very interesting way. And so electronically, it's sort of early electronic stuff in a way, electronica. It's also sort of early sampling, really, if you're looking at, you're manipulating tape, but you're essentially doing samples.
Yeah. It's all done on tape. There's no sampling as such. And
but were the loops created? Like, how was the tape manipulated?
Was very few loops. It was just the way it was on the original recording. You start at the beginning and play the tape through, and everything else was muted from the original song. There wasn't really any looping as such. It was what came up in the arrangement from the original song on a lot of the tunes. It's funny because I met. Should I tell you this? Maybe I met this guy. No, I don't think I'll tell you. No, because I can't remember what his name. I shouldn't really. In England here, there's the Barbican Theatre, which is a big concert hall called the Barbican, and they put on different events like. PJ Harvey would do things. We saw Suicide there with Alan Vega just before Alan Vega died. So they put on pretty hip stuff as well in a big concert hall, And I met this guy that was putting things on, and he contacted me, and he loved The Lure of Salvage. To him, it was the greatest record ever. And he wanted to make contact with Andy Partridge to see how Andy visualized putting it on at the Barbican as a theatre piece. This was the offer. Whatever the theatre piece is, we want The Lure of Salvage translated for the theatrical stage at the Barbican.
When was that?
About 3-4 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. I can't remember his name. It was something Smith. Was it not Robert Smith or John Smith? It was another Smith. And there's a label called Blast First. No, I think he managed that. But anyway, he put these concerts on. I never heard from him again. But basically, he had this budget, huge budget. Well, not huge, but he never said, but it was like anything you wanted. And he really wanted to sit and have dinner with Andy Partridge and discuss it because he loved the record. And of course, Andy didn't. Oh, they want me to perform. They want me to play. And I'm going, no, Andy, they don't. You don't even have to be there. Because the first thing I said to this guy is, you realize Andy won't go on stage. Oh, he doesn't have to be there. He just has to give his blessing that we can do it. So what sort of ideas do you think Andy's going to have? So I'm like, I don't know. And he said, well, we could do things with puppets, with giant puppets. And he wanted, what he originally wanted was me and Andy to perform the dubs in the studio and see the knobs twiddling and the switches being flicked and the tape going round and recreating a performance of The Lure of Salvage from the original tapes on stage, me and Andy. And I'm like, well, you can't really do that. You know, we're not Rastafaris and we're not dance people, and no one, you know, there's nothing more boring than sitting watching someone twiddling knobs, and we're going to do that every night at the show. And anyway, the idea came up for doing big puppets and even having giant tape machines, the way Neil Young had the big amps on stage. We were going to have giant tape machines going round with giant tape, you know, on the stage. And the whole thing was run by puppets, but it was The Lure of Salvage music. Great idea.
It's great.
Andy said no. He said, no, I don't really want to have anything to do with this, you know.
Okay.
Can't really. And it's like, I was kind of thinking, well, yeah, but you can actually do anything. You don't actually, they just want your blessing to, you know, obviously once everyone's going to go, well, what does Andy Partridge think of this if we did it? But, and, you know, and the guy was kind of, you know, the budget was not, you know, he was quite acceptable to, and he had contacts of puppet makers and all this kind of thing. And it just, I thought it would have been fantastic to recreate this giant puppet. And there'd be me and Andy there doing dubs, but it was done by giant puppets.
But it does show that people love that record.
Mm.
And is it true that it did very well in Japan?
I think so, yeah, it did. Because there's some Japanese, you know, wasn't there one called Workaway Tokyo Day? There's some Japanese Twitter sort of synth stuff going on, and it's very, yeah, I met DJs, Mixmaster Morris and different people that DJ like Ninja Tune people, and they love that record because they can put it on and everyone goes, oh, what's this, you know.
And it's 1980.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you'd run into people that were in the biz that were hip to that record.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, a few.
Yeah.
I can tell how it's all done. That's why it doesn't have the mystery as much as other people, you know.
But also, you run into people that constantly query you about Dukes of Stratosphear and 25 O'Clock.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously, I have to talk to you about Dukes of Stratosphear. Just one of my favorite, really favorite efforts by the guys, and it's just so magical. I guess I had asked Dave Gregory about this, and there's a number of things I want to ask you, but is it true that when it came out on April Fool's Day, 1985, that it was a mystery as to who the band was?
Yeah, they never announced it. Yeah, it was never. They tried to keep it a mystery. Yeah.
And how long did that last?
About a day, I think. You know, it didn't last. You know, they never confessed. I don't. You know, Andy would always do interviews in character, as it were. You know, I think, didn't he? I don't know.
Well, what are your recollections? Because that's like 2 weeks of work. It's a very short period by design.
First EP, 25 O'Clock. Yeah.
25 O'Clock. You were trying to replicate as much as possible what it would have been like to make a record during the psychedelic era in the 60s with the limitations of tape.
We didn't give out. We our only limitations were tape at the time. It was 24 track. You know, we didn't purposely use 60s techniques. We used any technique that was available.
Okay.
We didn't purposely use valve microphones, tube microphones or anything. We just used what was available. We wanted to make it sound like that. So no, we never limited ourselves to only using 60s equipment.
But what was the purpose of recording at that studio? Because I thought that studio was sort of a remnant from the past.
No.
Oh.
It's just a normal studio that was going cheap with accommodation.
At a church?
It was in a church, yeah. It's for sale, actually. I could send you. It's going for a good price with the house and the church next door. That studio. It's called the Chapel in Hampton Bishop. It's miles from anywhere. It's Hereford. Hereford is kind of between England and Wales, north of Bristol, in the middle of farmlands. You come off the freeway, and it's another hour through little country roads till you get there. So it's an awkward place. But yeah, it's available for sale at the moment, funny enough. Still with the equipment in and the studio, and because it's perfect studio because it's soundproof and the house is separate. So it's not like having the studio downstairs, or you've got great noise. The noise isolation is perfect, and the vibe, the whole thing is there. It's great. But no, we didn't purposely limit ourselves to 60s equipment as such, but we kept that attitude all the time. And it was, it was about the songs, and we just, everyone was, and they had such a great time doing it. I mean, I'm sure you've heard that they were relieved every time they go in the studio that, there was all this tension about being commercial and then coming up with a hit single. And, they'd always had this hell since the beginning, really, from Virgin, for hit singles, and suddenly here they were in the studio, really cheap, not spending loads of money, not spending thousands of pounds a day, and they're not in Los Angeles, and they're not, it's just them, and it's all for a lot of fun as well. So yeah, they really enjoyed it, and it wasn't that we were slapdash. Andy sort of, maybe Dev said, "Oh, we just did first take." It wasn't. We do a few takes until it was good, but of course they're great players, and they're quite capable of doing it in first take. The first go, and solos. We had a lot of spontaneity with it, and crazy stuff with Andy. The thing I think with Andy, he's very good at impersonation. He's very good at impersonating different voices or different styles, and you want me to sound like the Hollies, or you want me to sound like he's always got a little note that perfectly captures the Alice Cooper mode, or the Pink Floyd, or
Johnny Winter.
Yeah. But no, he's great at impersonating, and they're all and Dave Gregory is as well, of coming up with the sounds. And funny enough, Ian Gregory, the drummer, Dave's brother, was the same on the drums. Although he just played weddings, he wasn't a professional drummer, but he was quite capable. But he'd go to the snare drum. We'd say, "Oh, we're trying to be like the Stones on this one," and so he'd go to the snare drum and tune his snare drum like Charlie Watts would, or we want more of a garage kind of sound, and he'd do that. Or we want a Ringo tone, that kind of come together sort of Ringo tone, so put the tea towel. And
yep.
So he always came up with great drum sounds, himself, really.
Those are all his drum sounds. That's really
yeah, it's all live. There's no sampling or anything. It's all live.
No, not that, but I just mean like the way it was produced is not the whole sound, which I guess shouldn't be surprising. It's the instrument and the person playing it. But no vintage instruments, no Mellotron, no.
Well, everything's vintage. Yeah, it's Ludwig drum kit. Yeah, there's Mellotron. Yeah, I guess the vintage instruments. Yeah, but they're standard instruments you use in the studio anyway. Gibson, Fender, Mellotrons, Rickenbacker 12-string. Ludwig drum, Hammond organ, and all those, they're tradition. They're what's still used today. Really, they're the proper soul instruments. Really, I mean, you can't. You know, if your guitar isn't Fender or Gibson, then what's the point of playing guitar?
Yeah.
No, I mean, you know, they're the instruments of the trade that you use, you know.
I also heard that Andy was really encouraged to do it when he heard the Nick Nicely single Hilly Fields.
That's right, yeah. Yeah. And funny enough, The Damned went off and did a record as similar at the same time. It wasn't similar in sound, but it was a spoof psychedelic 60s record. I've forgotten what it's called now. But The Damned, Captain Sensible did that record. The Damned also did Alone Again, or, you know, the Love Forever Changes track. So they're always into that 60s period. Yeah. But, you know, it's obviously it's something that I'm into, and that tone, and it was great having the opportunity to exaggerate everything, you know, because, you know, and not have what could you say, commercial restraints, you know, not saying, oh, you can't have that bit's too loud, or those kind of things. And it was, you know, it was great fun. Mole from the Ministry, you know, was written at the time, written in the studio, and it was obvious it was going to be Strawberry Fields with everything else that goes on there, you know, kitchen sink.
Yeah. Yeah, Mole from the Ministry is probably my top Dukes track. I do love it dearly. So were there what's the processing going on? So you're aware of all the 60s techniques. Andy's aware of this. What kind of stuff are you doing to bring us to the 60s with these songs?
I'm probably not doing anything different to what I'd normally do, although it was how many years ago, 35 years ago, you know. I'm not doing it much any different in terms of what I'm using and the technique. It's 24 track, it's mixed down to tape, you know. I mean, you do it all different now, of course, but, you know, at that time, that's what the studio was. You know, there was no computer, and the studio didn't even have a half-inch tape. It was quarter-inch tape that went at 15, and the 24 track. You know, so and a Trident mixer. I mean, maybe the EQ was, you know, it's what you go for. It's like how you EQ something, whether you EQ it, what we tend to say, expensive. So it sounds expensive, which is if you're doing, I suppose, a commercial thing or an expensive project. You know, you'd have a special, I don't know, a Neve thing, or you use a lot of high frequency and low frequency and not the middle. I don't know. I don't really analyze what I'm doing. I just go for it, really. You just go for it, what you feel good at the time. And you know, and people, the great thing with XTC and Andy is, you know, they will encourage you. You know, they won't, you know, they might touch the mixer. No, they wouldn't touch the mixer. I mean, Andy wouldn't sort of let me have a go and go to the knobs. He'll enthuse and encourage, or screw his face. Oh no, you spoilt it now, or something. Oh, that's it. More of that kind of thing. So it's not really, you know, he wouldn't touch the equipment. He does now, of course. You know, it's always interesting that, because, you know, when I became a producer, I came from the engineering thing, and it took me quite a lot to not touch the equipment, to trust someone else doing it, you know. And obviously I'd worked with an engineer, maybe someone that I'd worked with before, and you could probably ask them, but, you know, I was notorious for reaching over and going, oh no, let me do it, you know. I'll get the sound on the snare drum, you know, you go away, you know. Go make the tea and I'll do the bass drum, kind of thing. But anyway, that's a big thing when you're producing, is particularly, you know, Steve Lillywhite, I think, has said the same, you know, and Hugh Padgham is, you know, is this great temptation to reach over and turn the knobs yourself and say, this is how I want it, you know. But when you're a producer, you have to sit at the back and relate to the musicians rather than what's going on the desk, or the whole thing, really. And suddenly when you get it as a producer and you think, hey, fuck, I don't actually have to do anything, I can just sit here and enjoy, you know.
Well, the 25 o'clock did very well, so much so that they wanted more, right?
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Geffen and everyone said this is fantastic, and you know, I can't remember. I was doing lots of other records at the time, and then suddenly Andy says, "Oh, we got to. They want some more of that, so we're going to go. You got another studio to go to. Try somewhere else." So I went to the Sawmills, which is down in Cornwall, which you can only get to on a boat. So Cornwall is in west of England, about 200 miles, 250 miles from London west, and it's up a river, a tidal estuary. So when the tide goes out, you can't get the boat in, and there's no road, you know. So you have to literally put all the equipment on the boat, sail in at high tide, you know. And if it's not high tide, of course, the boat is lower, and you have to lift, or the Hammond organ, you have to lift up, you know. Whereas if you get it at high tide, you can just wheel it off, you know, flight cases. That's why they're so fussy whenever you work there. It's always like 4 o'clock, don't be late, you know, 4 o'clock, because if you're here at 10 past 4, the tide will go down and you'll have to lift the flight cases. But if you're here dead at 4 o'clock, you just wheel them off, you know.
So who recorded there? You've done other projects there?
I did, yeah, loads of projects. I did Ride, the group Ride. I did an album with them, Carnival of Light. I did Cast, John Power from the Lars. I did 2 albums there. I did, I did The Verve, the first album, Storm in Heaven. That was all done at the Sawmills and mixed at the Sawmills. And I did Stone Roses' Fool's Gold, Fool's Gold, and the B-side that went with that, which was a big record for the Stone Roses that was all done at the Sawmills.
Well, they came to you. They came to you specifically because they liked the Dukes project.
Apparently, yeah. I think they deny it now, but apparently, yeah. But I tell you an interesting thing that it was only years later someone pointed out, and now I don't know if you know the Stone Roses album, Made of Stone. There's a track there, it's on side 2, called Made of Stone, and it's 25 o'clock. Da, 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 da. You know, the melody on the verse and the way it opens is the same as 25 o'clock.
Yeah, I always thought it was interesting too how 25 o'clock is related to Electric Prune's I Had Too Much to Dream Last Night.
Yeah, that's the intent. That's where it came from. Yeah.
So, right. And any other recollections from the second one, Sonic Sunspot?
Sonic Sunspot. Just trying to think what's on it. Only, let me think now.
Vanishing Girl, Have You Seen Jackie, Little Lighthouse, Albert
Vanishing
Brown.
Girl. Vanishing Girl is the Hollies, isn't it? With the 12-string. Yeah, that's great. That's Colin's song. Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. And You're My Drug, with which is So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star, but You're My Drug, after the mix, every time it said You're My Drug, I would phase it. So I would copy it, and then we went, You're My Drug, hand phase it, and edit it in. And as soon as it finished, edit out. And then every time he goes, You're My Drug, there's an edit of phased mix. The whole mix just phased. You're My Drug. Every time he says drug, phase, and edit in and edit out. And there's like 24 edits there on the whole song. Always a lot of fun, always a challenge, but the end result is like, hey, that's absolutely, it's always worth it at the end when the pressure of doing all that. Other things, Pale and Precious is great, and the Beach Boys' last track. I mean, a lot of time spent on that with the harmonies and things, and getting the right tone on the bass. The bass with the echo delay on it, dum dum dum, and the snare. Ian couldn't get the snare in the middle of that. There's this kind of up she rises, up she rises, and there's a sort of snare shuffle. and Andy played that because Ian just couldn't get it because it's difficult timing. Every track's a winner. I'm trying to think what else. There's a few odd ones, and of course Andy wanted to do the bubblegum record, which was the bubblegum, the sweet and the kind of real glam rock thing, cheesy kind of thing, and that never came together. And I guess, I think we had enough of the Dukes after with those two albums.
But there are two other songs on that record that I wanted to mention. Kaleidoscope.
Oh yeah, careful, don't look down the wrong end.
Right, because you don't know what'll happen. And Brainiac's Daughter.
Oh yeah. Brainiac's Daughter is Paul, isn't it? It's Paul McCartney, I suppose, with a big splash.
Yeah. Now, as far as flying in foreign sounds and things like that, what can you talk about that? Because there's that, and there's also the sort of interstitial narration by the child. Not narration, but story. Yeah.
Flying in different effects. I mean, when we started, Andy came in with a load of sound effects records, on vinyl, and I just copied them, made up a sound effects reel, went through, let's pick that. This was probably my training, you have to make up a 1/4-inch reel with white leader in between each one, write it all down, and so, we need the sound of seagulls. I got seagulls, jump, and you go straight to the button and on the seagulls. But what was interesting about, not so much on the Sonic Sunspot, but the 25 O'Clock record is where we discovered it all, was I made up this compilation tape of various sound effects like cows mooing and dogs barking, people laughing and this kind of thing. And as I say, banded it all together and we had it there. And when we did the mix, we would let it run. And if the mix got boring, purely at random, whenever you felt like it, you could push up the effects fader, but you didn't know what was on it. You didn't know what was coming through, you see. You didn't know if it was going to be cow mewing or seagulls or what, or just silence, just blank tape, And so that was just left running randomly, and no one knew what was going to be on it. And there were the faders. So in the middle of the mix, in the middle of the solo, you just give a bit of effects, or you'll give a lot, suddenly turn it up really loud. And then when you listen to it back, you'll just fall about laughing because they would always come at the right place, because like a Mole from the Ministry in particular, there's the horse, as it goes into the middle eight, there's a horse kind of neighing. And that was the effects tape. Someone just turned it up full. And it just happened to be there. So there's a lot of spontaneity in that record, almost like, I don't know if that's the right word, self-induced spontaneity, like we purposely made it so that there were going to be unexpected surprises, so we had to take charge. And if it made us laugh, it was like, yeah, keep that, It's, oh no, you've done it wrong, we have to do it again, so there was always a standard that we all recognized of what was acceptable, if you see what I mean.
Of course, and that would have been a big part of that music at that time in psychedelia. How did you process the voice at the beginning of Mole?
It pans across, doesn't it?
And also it's sort of, it seems like it's pitched.
Slowed down. Yeah. We kind of go, what kind of sound does a mole, Andy, you go, well, I'm going to sing this like a mole, I'm a mole, so what mole sounds like this? So obviously you slow it down, or actually you speed it up. You send him the tape fast and he sings in his exaggerated way, and when you play it back, it's even more exaggerated like a mole. So you just do that, and of course it's a lot of fun, and you try recording something and playing it back slower. It's always funny, it's always makes you laugh, It's fun. It's weird, that, isn't it? Backwards, of course, is a different thing. Backwards is some weird Germanic sort of language or something, but when you change the speed of stuff, it's a lot, and they did it all the time. The Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's full of it, Paul's voice all sped up, and and Penny Lane and all those sort of things. Yeah.
And all that stuff goes back to Les Paul with tape speed, right?
Yeah, well, you do what you can with the medium, with the tools there. You abuse them, or it's like, I can't speed it up enough. I need to speed it up more.
Yeah.
And of course, nowadays with the computer, you can do all that. No one, everyone's heard that stuff before. That's the crazy thing with a computer, is that you can do whatever you want, and you can also undo it. Whereas a lot of the time, if you're going to record the vocals slowed down, that's it. You can't. I'm going to send you the track really fast, and when we play it back normal speed, your voice is going to sound really slow. Oh, can I do it again? No, you have to do it again. You can't undo the effect, which makes it more exciting. And to me, it does anyway. It makes it more real.
Yeah. No, it's very authentic, I think is the word for so much of that stuff, and it really does harken back to that era in how creative it was.
Yeah.
Just how everything was on the table. And
you mean 60s era?
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. With all those people, Norman Smith with Piper at the Gates of Dawn, and particularly SF Sorrow, with Pretty Things. You go to that Pretty Things SF Sorrow with Norman Smith, and it's like Piper at the Gates of Dawn exaggerated, like the acoustic. He's got the jigga jang, like acoustic guitars that are just, I don't know, compressed. How do you do that? It's all double tracked, triple tracked with, huge compression, but it's just one blast. I don't know if you heard Defecting Grey by Pretty Things. Defecting Grey, Sitting Alone on a Bench with You.
Yeah, those are two classic examples of Pretty Things and the Piper record.
Yeah.
You sort of you could go back to that and mine that forever.
Yeah. And Family, Music in a Doll's House. Now, Family, this is going to be a prog podcast, and I kept thinking, hang on, what's prog? What am I going to do? And I kept thinking, I actually, when I emailed Andy and said I was going to do it, I said, well, prog to me is the Nice doing Thoughts of Emilis Davjak. Used to see the Nice at Klux Cleat going right back. We followed the Nice with David O. List, and Lee Jackson. The best group, absolutely. The Nice were just like absolute gods to us in terms of sound. And David O. List and Hendrix, David O. List often didn't play, he just had feedback going and all sorts of stuff. And you had this, you had Keith Emerson. And of course, when Keith Emerson's, and no one took any notice of Keith Emerson because he was just showing off, he was like jumping on the organ, throwing knives at the Leslie and so yeah, we used to see the Nice any time we could, really, because it was such a sensational thing. Not because of Keith Emerson, but because of the whole thing, really. And Thoughts of it, this is all before, because I remember when Thoughts of Emilis Davjak came out, we knew all the songs. But it's not so good live. Oh, that track's better on the record than what it is live, Wow. So it's one of those things where we'd heard the songs. And then Family, Music in a Doll's House, fantastic, one of the best things. And of course, that's done at Olympic with Eddie Kramer. At the same time was doing Hendrix and Magical Mystery Tour, of course, because the Beatles went there and did Hey Jude, Magical Mystery Tour at Olympic, as well as all the Stones and everything. Ichiku Park was all done in the same studio and with the same settings as Family, Music in a Doll's House. Sounds tough, those records.
Yeah. You bring up this idea of prog, and for me, John, I feel like so much of that music is progressive. So you're,
well, it's unheard of before. No one had heard it before.
Yeah, and it's definitely taking what had existed in pop and bringing it forward into another area of the contemporary culture, whatever you want to call that, drug culture, art culture. And so for me, it's almost just a general term. It's not specifically Emerson, Lake and Palmer and King Crimson, you know. It's progressive music. Anybody that's trying to do something different
Yeah.
and move things forward a little bit. And I see the roots of so-called prog, if you want, in the Court of the Crimson King. It's coming on the heels of all of that great psychedelic music.
Yeah.
And of course has psychedelic elements to it. So really it just sort of all folds in together. And you know, you look at XTC and some of their tracks are so odd and so forward moving of song form or melody or chords or rhythm. Sorry, but you know, Andy, that's kind of progressive. So, you know, and it's not an important label in a way. It's more of an important concept to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So it's funny that you mentioned family because yeah, we you know John Wetton and we assume that there's so much progressive music that's people say oh family's in the prog family tree, but you're talking about a period too where the Nice are existing during psychedelia.
Yeah.
So are they psych or are they prog? You know, we don't know.
Well, yeah, they're a bit of everything, really. This is the Nice when they first started, when they released America as a single. You know, that was the single on before, I think before the album. But I used to have the single A side and B side, and Family. You know, we used to see all these bands at Klux Kleek. You know, they would all see them on a Tuesday night. You know.
Did you see Caravan?
No, I
Oh,
never saw Caravan. Crazy World of Arthur Brown with Vincent Crane, of course, that's pretty prog with pretty playing and stuff.
mm.
Um, ooh, I should get the list out. I can't remember who else there was there. Probably lots.
I, you know, John Leckie, I could speak to you for hours and hours, but I feel like we've covered so much today, and I
Great.
hope we can come back and do a part two sometime.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we can. Well, whatever you want to cover after this, after the Dukes.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you know, please do come back and thank you so much for sharing all your
Okay.
knowledge and experience with us. It's just been great chatting with you.
All right. Great, Greg. All right. I really enjoyed it. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.